So the CMA is the general regulator in the UK, and its primary goal is to try to make sure that competition works, and that has various angles to it. If you look at their website, they say a variety of things, and I'll give some examples of the ways in which they work. Their overall strapline, in terms of what they say they're going to do, is that their goal is, on the one hand, to promote competitive markets. So it's what we said before, that the key goal of the regulators is kind of not to be needed. So if markets are competitive, there is no need for a regulator, and also they want to tackle unfair behaviour, and that's this. Whatever that might mean, and that's the CMA's overarching statement of what it is that they do. So if we look at kind of what are the CMA's key functions, again, if you look at what they say, things they do include they investigate mergers. You can see why that would be the case, because there are some mergers that, if they go ahead, they're going to lead to excessive monopoly power inside a market. So I know I keep saying this, but Sainsbury's and Asda, they were planning on merging a few years back now. The CMA blocked that merger because it didn't believe that would promote competitive markets. It would restrict competition. They're also responsible for taking action if they see cartels. So they take action against cartels, or more generally, against anti-competitive behaviour. So anti-competitive behaviour might not be illegal. It might just be something where the CMA is looking at it and kind of saying, I don't really like the look of this. So some years ago, the supermarket Tesco, what they used to do is they would buy land. Seems perfectly reasonable. They'd buy land around the outskirts of cities, and some of that land was intended for them to be able to develop on in the future, and so on and so forth. But the effect that it had is that this land couldn't be used or bought by any other supermarkets. And it had the effect that this was restricting competition in the supermarket sector, because it was effectively acting as a barrier to entry. Whether that was intentional or not isn't clear. Nevertheless, the CMA says, well, I don't think that this is good for the working of a competitive market. And over a number of years, Tesco was told basically to sell off those land banks. So, nobody's saying that that Tesco was behaving deliberately behaving in an anti-competitive way, but the CMA looked at that and kind of said, I think this is having an unfortunate effect. Individually, it can protect consumers from unfair practices. So one of the, and linked to the same thing, it can investigate entire markets if it believes that competition isn't working. So if it thinks that taking those two things together, if competition isn't working, and as a result, consumers are being victimised by unfair practices, the CMA can intervene, and importantly, it can impose remedies. So a few years ago, there was an investigation into the undertaking market, the funeral market, in terms of what happens when somebody dies. And what they found is that people who would take in what are called undertakers, people who take in the dead bodies, they often had agreements with care homes, for example. So if somebody died in a care home, the care home, for a fee, would recommend a particular undertaker. Or the undertaker would have agreements with firms that would sell flowers and so on and so forth. In some cases, you would go in asking about a funeral, you'd be very upset, and you'd never find out the price. You'd just sign a contract and only find out the price much later. And the CMA decided that this isn't a market that's working very well, and they imposed remedies. They investigated the market, and they said, this isn't great. And they then said, right, from going forward, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do this, and so on and so forth. And I'll talk a little bit more about those remedies in a minute. And the last thing that, well, there are other things they do. The last important thing they do is that they will listen to appeals against the decisions of the watchdogs. So we talked about the watchdogs, like Ofgem or Ofwat. Ofwat is the Office of Water, Ofgem is the Office of Gas and Electricity Marketing. They have the ability to impose price controls on their sectors and insist on other remedies. If you don't like it, then the CMA will hear an appeal against the decision that these watchdogs like Ofgem, Ofwat and so on have made. So if we look, what we're saying then is that the CMA, it can investigate, but very importantly, it also has powers. What sorts of things can the CMA do? The CMA can impose price caps if it wants. I was reading just now. I was reading about a decision that they made last year, in 2023, to impose a price cap on Motorola. So Motorola, it turns out, operates the emergency frequency that the police and ambulances and so on use to communicate, when bad things are happening. Turns out this is basically a monopoly. That they have no choice other than to use Motorola's network, and Motorola was charging them, an unfair price. The regulator stepped in and said, no, we're not going to allow that. You're going to have to reduce your prices. We talked before, about we can force actions. So we said that Tesco a few years ago had to sell their land banks. It's also the case that, again, going back a few years, BAA, it's used to, which owns airports in the UK, they used to own Gatwick, Heathrow, and Stansted. The CMA, back then it was called something different, but the CMA said, you can't have these three airports. This is not competitive. You're going to have to sell two of them. And they had the power to force BAA to sell two of those three airports. So BAA now only owns Heathrow. We looked at or we looked at the kind of the funeral market, where the way in which you're allowed to market your products, the information that you give. So there are controls on information, on contracts, and so on and so forth. So there are the ability to do a whole variety of different things, to try to make sure that that competition works for consumers, and therefore the CMA it is genuinely quite powerful. It can block mergers, it can impose price controls, it can force you to sell off bits of your business. It can tell you not to behave in particular ways. It can govern the contracts that you give out, the information that you have to provide to consumers. So they regulated supermarkets over the pricing policies, the pricing of products inside their stores in terms of making sure that consumers could understand it. Therefore, the CMA has quite a lot of powers, but it is a very general regulator. And it has to find or be alerted to a problem, before something's going to happen. It has to run an investigation of the market before it can really come to conclusions. So it's unlikely to pick up, kind of relatively minor problems. It needs to be something that's kind of widespread and sectoral before the CMA is really going to do very much. But it is powerful once it acts.